big things that Unilever has taught me is to have faith in marketing.
People before joining BFSI are scared that it'll be boring and it'll be too complicated and restricted.
BFSI does tend to color more within the lines. That's the nature of the industry. Make peace with the fact that the reason why it is more regulated is because people's money, lives, their futures are at stake. Creative craft is not supposed to be repetitive. It is supposed to be inspirational. It's supposed to make you feel something. No bot can do that. Only a human being can do that. AI is going to replace the entire marketing department, the entire creative agency network. It's not going to happen.
Hey there, welcome to Marketing Mavericks with IndieFolio. Today we have Jyoti Samajpati with us, who is the Executive Vice President of Marketing at Kotak Mahindra Bank. Jyoti's had an incredible career. She studied economics, then went on to the brand role and spent about 17 years in Unilever, heading a lot of exciting brands like Colgate, Sunsilk, Dove, Lakme, and a lot more. A lot of advice for young marketers, for agencies who are scared about AI, and we discuss a lot more. Thanks a lot for your time and welcome to the podcast, Jyoti.
Hi, Kavan. I'm so happy to be here and that finally we could make it happen.
It's been a long time in the making and I'm super excited to, unpack your journey. So let's start right at the beginning. I believe you were doing economics in Ferguson. So take me back to that time where I think just before that you decided to do an MBA in marketing, right? So what is it that inspired you to actually build a career in this area?
So I come from a Tambram family. Both my parents are from IIT. I think the logical thing that they would have wanted for me is to become an engineer, live the US dream, not so much a dream anymore, but that was the plan, right? And then as I got sort of into college, and I would say post school, junior college, I realized that I enjoyed the arts a lot more. I didn't enjoy it. I was great at math. I was good at science, but I didn't enjoy it as much. Thankfully, I have parents who allow a little bit of leeway for me to, make choices. And so I ended up doing my graduation in economics. And the logical step after that was actually to either get into teaching. And at that point, I don't think I was sort of a great teacher mindset. The logical other option, if I didn't want to sort of take on teaching, was to do an MBA in finance. And so that was the game plan. The game plan was actually an MBA in finance. And as most first year MBA sort of degrees end up being common across. You do finance, but you also do other sort of subjects, and marketing was one of them. And I think the first time I sat for a marketing lecture, as filmy as it sounds, there was a little bit of a ding that went off in my head saying, hey, this is interesting. Because I'd done a little bit of psychology in my junior college and graduation as well. And it sort of came together in this almost unorchestrated manner that this is what I want to spend my life doing, not sort of making money, not sort of dealing with the whole sort of accounts, finance, that entire thing. And that's how my journey into marketing and sort of the MBA started off.
Awesome. So I think foundational courses owe a lot to people's careers,
Yeah.
and I think you should try and expose yourself to a lot of that is what my takeaway is. Um, your first job, if I'm not wrong, was on the agency side,
That's right.
and often marketers are advised that either do a sales job, either do an agency job, or maybe you can directly become a brand manager often today.
Yeah.
So how is it like, working with an agency? If I had all these options, what's your really real sell? Why you should do your first job on the agency side?
I think whether it's your first job or a stint in an agency, the thing that it opens you up to, a lot of marketing is about storytelling. And there's nobody who can tell stories better than someone in an agency because that is their day job. That is what they get paid to do. That is what, that they are trained to do and are passionate about. And I think the agency stint, what it teaches you is the beauty of the craft of storytelling. And that might have evolved, right? I mean, when I first joined, the 30-second, even today it tends to be, but 30-second TV commercial was everything. And how do I fit like a 2 hour story into 30 seconds and still make it sort of engaging and still make it interesting and fun and within the brand tonality, etc. All those were the challenges, and it's amazing the amount of work and craft that goes into that. It has evolved now in digital, even more so with the content explosion we're seeing and how we're consuming content as human beings. But I think the agency teaches you that being able to shift and craft narratives into a story that's compelling, that's inspiring, that's enjoyable, any of those things. I think that was my biggest takeaway from my stint was that, and so I highly recommend. As you mentioned, whether it is a sales stint or an agency stint, the agency stint tends to be more fun. The sales stint is a lot more work. So if you're like me, who wants more fun, slightly lesser work, I would steer you in the direction of an agency stint. Yeah, but that was it. And I think the other thing that it teaches you is to stand up for your ideas, because a large part of the agency job is to fight for your ideas, is to fight for your creative person's ideas, to convince people with logic, with magic, whichever way you look at it, right? You've got to convince people to stand behind your idea. And again, that's the other thing that has shaped how I approach my job as a marketer. It helps me argue for what I want. It helps me be passionate for what I want, and what I believe in. And I think there's no place like an agency to teach you that.
When I talk to people who are curious about marketing, they often feel marketing is advertising. कि celebrity के साथ काम करना है, you make ads, and it's like this roller coaster of a ride. But then when people try and understand the brand side roles, and I think after
Hmm.
Lintas you move to your brand side role pretty earlier on, the
Yeah.
story really changes, right? So for anybody out there, like what's really the difference between marketing in the agency side versus marketing in the brand side?
I think marketing in the agency side is restricted to advertising, and advertising in all its forms, right? Whether it is TV or it's print or it's radio or it is a brand narrative that you're crafting, writing of the briefs, all of those things are what the agency side means when they say marketing. From the FMCG or the sort of the holistic marketing function, if I can call it that, has a lot more. It has the full mix journey as a part of it. So there is product development, innovation development, working with R&D to sort of build that. There's packaging and design. There is claims and regulatory. There is, of course, advertising and sort of storytelling that you work with the agency to do. There is customer relationship management. How do I handle complaints? How do I build equity within each of these different spheres? All of that gets covered under marketing. So you own that end to end funnel of right from product to positioning to equity building to delivery of the product and proposition and sort of the promise, and then sort of funneling that back to creating consumers that love your brand, your products, and sort of become your ambassadors in the future.
Understood. I think um, uh, people often forget the non-customer centric things, or I wouldn't say non-customer centric thing. I think uh, everything other than the advertising and communication, because usually brands put the most money on that, so everybody kind of sees it. They don't really understand what goes behind the scenes. So it's very important for somebody to, I think, actually get a grasp of all the piece, and it's not just that one particular communication piece which somebody looks at.
You're
Um,
right. Visible investment happens in advertising, but there's a lot of investment that happens in R&D and technology. There's a lot of investment that happens in design, in FMCG, in banking. A lot of investment goes behind the technology that powers the banking functions. A lot of it, goes behind people and service delivery, and all of that is actually part of marketing development, because finally you want a holistic consumer experience to be delivered, and all parts of that consumer experience are actually part of marketing. And you're right, it starts with sort of the consumer insight at the heart of it, but there is all of that and so many ways to deliver it. And so the visible parts, but there are also the slightly less visible but equally important parts that are part of the function.
Because this is so vast. I often see people confused that they're like, if I'm a creative person, should I join marketing? Or if I'm an analytical person, should I join marketing? People are a little bit confused because it covers both sides of things. In your
Yeah.
experience, like, who do you think is it more for? Is it a creative role, or is it more like an analyst strategic role?
I mean, I want to give you first the easy answer, which is it's for somebody who has both, right? Because marketing is equal logic and magic, and somebody who is able to sort of have left brain, right brain on at all points in time make the best marketers because they can analyze things to death, assimilate a lot of data, see patterns in sort of very diverse data input sheets, but at the same time are able to articulate it in a way that's inspiring for the agency, that eventually translates into sort of really good design or advertising for a consumer. So I'd like to say both. But 100%, I think if you're creative, you should definitely think about marketing and marketing on the agency side or not on the agency side. I think if you're analytical, there is space for analytical people in marketing. But then you have to build the muscle or surround yourself by people who are creative in that case. And that's the other thing, that I find that when a lot of younger managers do conversations with me saying, how do I do it all? The truth is you never do it all. Marketing is one of those functions actually that you lean so heavily on so many other people to create value, that then surround yourself by the right people and the right teams, and then that sort of makes you whole and a better marketer. So I don't think it's off the table for either side. I think the self awareness to know I'm really good at this I'm still learning, and so I'd like to surround myself with people who are like me and unlike me. I think that sort of is a good blend to make someone successful.
You spent 17 years in Unilever, and often I've had folks who've come on board and told me that Unilever has been a real school for them while they were kind of growing. And there are very similar journeys I see where people spend 15
Yeah.
years, 20 years in that one company across various products. In your case, I believe it's Close Up, Dove, Lakme. I have a whole list because it's many, many brands, Sunsilk, etc.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I want to actually know from your stint there is some advice for, I believe, entrepreneurs of young
Mm.
companies or marketers, who are doing a 0 to 1 right now.
Mm.
You speak a lot about brand love, and
Yeah.
that's something Unilever constantly invests in. But as an entrepreneur myself, right, it's expensive sometimes, it feels like. And you know performance ads and things like that are more tactical, trackable. They appease my investors pressure also, because I'm
Yeah.
able to have a predictable growth. What's the ROI on brand? I think even today we don't really have a clear answer, because it's something you feel. While
Yeah.
objectively, I would say retention and increased price value is what brand can get you. You don't know when, you don't know what will
Mm.
exactly work. And that's why people think it's very risky to invest earlier on. So I wanted to know, is there a certain time for us to invest in brand and brand love? If so, what is that? And if not, if it can happen on a shoestring budget, what are
Mm.
your thoughts on how to do brand love 101 for a young company?
So look, brand love without the performance is like poetry, right? And performance without being able to create brand love is just transaction. And the thing about transactions, especially when you're a small brand trying to establish yourself in that 0 to 1 game, is that you can keep adding transactions and there's some value to it, but the real sort of tipping point is when you're able to also build brand love, because otherwise over time your ROI, in shorter periods of time, your ROI makes sense because you're only looking at a particular set of clicks and what it's translating into in terms of growth or sale. But the thing is, when all of those clicks don't really build to a larger brand narrative or a larger brand ethos, you will not get the multiplier effect or that fillip that you need Think about it a little bit like brand credits, a little like how we talk about carbon credits, right? Which is over time you're able to build little pieces of a larger narrative,
Hmm.
and so suddenly you'll realize at a point in time that that brand means something and it makes a consumer feel something, and both are important. And actually the second one is a slower burn but is very critical. I think it's a good question, saying when you're on a shoestring budget, how do you do it, right? It's great in theory to say all of these things. The thing that Unilever has taught me, that Kotak teaches me as well every day, is I think there's a problem that you're solving as a marketer for a consumer. Be true to that problem that you're solving in everything that you do. And so, if it is about making someone feel more confident, make sure that you're doing that. In terms of the product delivery, in terms of the story that you're telling, in terms of the situation that you're depicting. If it's about self love, be about that. If it's about safety and trust, be about that, right? So that's the first thing, saying on a shoestring budget, make sure that the mix is again delivering towards the larger message as well. Advertising, as I keep saying, is only a part of it. And yes, it's the investment part of it. But even in terms of, and we've seen so many great indie brands. I love small brands, by the way, because I think they break rules like nobody else can in the best way possible, right? They use every inch of real estate that they can get, whether it is the packaging, whether it is an online banner, whether it is a sales touch point, to tell that story. So my advice is, be consistent, have a larger narrative in your mind as you're chasing the clicks and the conversions, to build that bank of credits or brand credits. Do a few things along the way that are more about the emotion. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean it's devoid of logic. It's
Hmm.
just that it has to make someone who's viewing it, touching it, feeling it, feel something.
Hmm.
Because we're all, I mean, more than anything, human beings are irrational because we have emotion in us, right? And so you have to be able to also work towards that. Um, Besides the conversion, and look, I'm familiar with the investor conversations. I
Hmm.
think one of the big things that Unilever has taught me is to have faith in marketing, and that if you're doing the right things, the result will come, and it teaches you that patience and the resilience that you need, saying just hold on for a bit more, things will turn. And we've seen it happen time and time again, both for the better and for the worse. And so I think that's an important thing to remember, saying have patience to when you're building something for the future, while still appeasing the sort of the short term demands that all of us tend to have.
I love that answer. I think there is. I think if you just invest a lot of time in understanding your customer and what they like as a young company, that's a big answer. In terms of what you could do often. And I think I've worked with founders who've invested in brand, and after 2 years, 3 years, their CTRs are improving on performance. Like if you really want to know, because people just want, there's an inbound
Yeah.
interest towards your company. Um, you after spending 17 years decided to switch to BFSI, and I have
Yeah.
a lot of questions around that, right? Usually when people are deciding what to do in their career, they're advised pick one category and master it, right? And then the idea is you'll become such an expert that one day you'll become a leader and you'll become CEO, God knows what. So it's really hard, I think, for people to realize, okay, maybe 20 years from now I could apply to a different category, because they feel,
Mm.
yeah, what if there is somebody else who's maybe done 20 years in BFSI? Wouldn't
Mm.
they trump me because I come from a very different category in the past? So, could you just share how do these things happen, where a large company would entrust somebody with a very different category to come on board?
Yeah.
Would love to hear what interested you and what maybe even picked them to get you on board.
I think what interested me is, and it's not bad advice, by the way, that people give, saying get really good at something, right? And for that, you do need some depth of experience. So I find a lot of Gen Z, and as a millennial, I like saying this often, which is they tend to not have the patience to see things through. And so I see a lot of sort of switching that I see in young managers these days. And one of my early bosses told me this, saying for the first 2 years of a stint, you're actually taking more than giving in terms of the company and the brand, because you're learning, you're making mistakes, you're figuring out your feet. It's only after year two that you start delivering for the brand and the company. So the minute you start doing very short stints, you are only sort of taking away both from yourself and from the company. So
Mm.
yes, do build depth of experience. It's very sound advice to say build depth of experience. But I think one of the things that we were taught, at least when we were younger, is that the corporate journey tends to be a ladder, and you have to keep climbing the next rung and the next rung and the next rung. And the depth of experience actually helps you do that, right?
Mm.
Because, like you said, you become an expert at something, and 20 years from now, I'll be like the god at something, and I've climbed that ladder, right?
Right.
What I've realized over my career, at least, and looking at people around me, that actually today careers are no longer ladders, they are like jungle gyms.
Mhm.
And so every swing that you have builds a certain muscle, and that muscle is actually what makes you flexible, resilient, and future ready. And if you want a future proof career, you do have to think about your career like a jungle gym. And for that, I think, like, I always give this advice to people, saying chase the learning curve rather than that ladder, because the learning curve automatically will push you out of your comfort zone. And by the way, this switch to BFSI was highly uncomfortable. Like, I would be lying if I said that, oh, it's the easiest thing in the world. It's not easy, right? But jungle gyms are not easy if you've ever been on one as a child. They're hard, right? You slip, you're upside down sometimes. And it's very much that, which is, it is through that exercise that you build new muscles. And that is what makes for a better, stronger, more fulfilling career. I think from Kotak's point of view, the bank's really trying to become much more customer centric. I think BFSI for the longest time has been plagued with this issue of being very feature first, right? I have a bunch of features which I need to sell to a bunch of people, and the more people that buy those features, that's how I'm going to grow. I think BFSI is waking up to the fact that FMCG has known for a very long time, which is that really
Mm.
getting under customer skin and consumer motivations and needs, and problem solving for those, and appealing to those motivations. There is growth to be had over there. And I think that awakening that we're seeing at Kotak actually is what prompted them to pick someone like me, who has zero banking experience, but not, I would say, particularly high on banking or fintech. But I think what they look to me to bring in is actually this absolute obsession with the consumer, and the consumer problems, and for that to actually help in terms of the output and the work and the offerings that we have for our customers, but also just culturally get people more attuned to thinking like this. And I think, like, it's an interesting experiment for me, for large companies to be able to be open to
Mm.
taking the risk, because it's a risk, to sort of bring people in who don't have domain expertise, but have other areas of expertise. And that amalgamation is, I think, why Kotak brought me in, with the hope that it will lead to something again that is more sort of in tune with what our customers need.
That's awesome. I feel it's so needed, right? I think BFSI, even B2B, these industries are really like losing out on
Hmm.
um, a whole chunk of things because they feel that's how it has been done and that's what will work. And I think the
Hmm.
homogeneity generally in BFSI is really scary on how do
Yeah.
you do it. But I wanted to ask you, I work a lot in BFSI.
Okay.
Um, People before joining BFSI are scared that it'll be boring and it'll be too complicated and restricted कि कुछ कर ही नहीं सकते कुछ allowed ही नहीं है Have you
Hmm.
seen that to be true?
It is true. Like BFSI does tend to color more within the lines, right? Again, it is more regulated. That's the nature of the industry. I think
Mhm.
when you, how do I say this, make peace with the fact that the reason why it is more regulated is because people's money, lives, their futures are at stake.
Mm.
Then you start sort of trying to find a way around these things, because you will initially, I think even I did push back a lot on the regulation and saying that, oh my god, how am I supposed to do my job, right? But the truth is there's a reason why those regulations exist, and I think when you accept that, for when you meet consumers, right, who said, I got a wrong piece of advice and I lost my entire life savings and my children's education plan changed as a result of it, you realize the implications of some of those things.
Right.
And um, in FMCG, you deliver sort of trust through consistent, product experiences, through your advertising, through things like that.
Mm.
In BFSI, you actually deliver trust through making banking safer, making
Mhm.
it faster, making sure that it's personalized and right for a particular cohort, so that you talk to an affluent consumer differently, you talk to an early jobber differently, and I think that's how you build trust that this bank really gets me. And all of that is possible within this regulatory framework, because a lot of also BFSI, as you mentioned, is about demystifying jargons, educating, making the experience of using technology to make the experience, whether it is the app or it is, the branches or it is your people, making that experience sort of seamless and create value for the customer. I think all that is possible still. We're still sort of scratching the surface as far as that goes, in spite of it being regulated. So I think there is still room for all of this, and it isn't about sort of flashy, bombastic advertising. I don't think a lot of banking actually is about the ads that you put out at all. Other than base level awareness, I don't think they do much. But there's a lot on the customer experience. Can I have seamless digital onboarding sort of journeys? Can I make my service exceptional? Can I do the right conversation with you at the right time? You're looking for a loan. Why are you looking for a loan? What sort of a loan do you want? You're looking for an investment solution. Why? What dreams do you have? Things like that. I think there's so much more that banking can uncover without coloring outside the lines.
Absolutely. So I think good luck to you. Super excited to see, what you do with the brand. I now have, a few questions for agencies and freelancers. So IndieFolio is a network of, I think, some of the largest, teams of freelancers and boutique studio founders. And one thing which has been on our mind is the approach a lot of brands are taking today, which is to insource, right? They're building internal creative teams. I've often seen these examples.
Yeah.
Um, you've been, in a company like Unilever, which is really a great example of partnering with fantastic agencies and co-building brands together with them. I've often heard from some veterans in the agency side that in Unilever, the teams changed but the agency did not often, and they used to do a brand handover.
Induction.
Agency used to do a brand over a long time
Yeah.
ago. So
Yeah.
um, I wanted to know from your perspective, like what's your take on doing creative today? Do you feel that there is a case for marketers to build an in-house team, and do you feel outsourcing as do you think dependency on agencies will decrease as time comes, especially with AI looming over our head?
I'm glad you've touched on AI. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about it in a bit. But I think to go back to the main question that you're asking, for me, my experience has always been that partnering with strong agency teams has always given us the best results. And the reason for that is that agencies are very good at what they do. Now you can move talent inwards, but the thing that makes the thing about creative output, the thing that makes people really good at giving you creative output is actually your perspective, your work perspective, your life perspective. And agency people, again, having been on the other side, build it through their body of work, through their body of brands. So while I have had specific agency teams on my brand, the same guys have worked on other brands at the same time in a lot of cases. And what it gives them is this ability to draw human connection across different things. And that lends itself to great creative output, because you're looking at a human being, a housewife, let's say, and you're looking at her from so many different angles, right? Because she is buying a Fair and Lovely. She is equally sort of buying a surf detergent. She is equally making decisions on her kids' schooling. She is also equally instructing the help in terms of how to run the house. A creative person actually sees all versions of this housewife. And so the minute you move that in house, you lose so many dimensions. And so I think over time, you won't feel it immediately because they'll come in with it initially. I think over time, you'll start seeing much more mediocre creative output. And that's the case for not moving it in house. The case
Hmm.
for moving it in house is purely a budget and a economics discussion, right? Which is,
Hmm.
I'm able to more tightly control overheads because they are now part of my cost center. And I agree that agencies, a lot of agencies, tend to have sort of large overhead costs. I think the trick is now the smaller creative, shops that exist that have eliminated these overheads and these large extravagant agency structures that are still very effective without losing the creative energy and sort of the skill that is required for it. That is the future. And so if
Mhm.
you ask me, I would never move my creative agency in house, but the choice of agency could shift more in the direction of the smaller, more agile, more hungry sort of agencies. Now, when it comes to the question on AI, right? I find it fascinating that, of course, AI has touched every industry as it will, and marketing is one of the largest industries it has touched. I think there is a case for efficiency, which is AI led, right? And optimization. And it can help you do that, whether it is programmatic media, whether it is, we use AI for our service requests, things like that, right? It is going to cut down for document checks, things like that. It is going to cut down repetitive tasks, the amount of time and humans that are needed for repetitive things. But the creative craft is not supposed to be repetitive. It is
Mhm.
supposed to be inspirational. It's supposed to make you feel something. And no bot can do that. Only a human being can do that. And so a lot of these conversations that we're having, these doomsday conversations saying AI is going to replace the entire marketing department, the entire creative agency network, it's not going to happen. It's
Hmm.
not going to happen because we're not looking for more content. We're looking for content that's engaging. We're looking for stories that sort of cut through and inspire us. And I don't think AI is going to take over that part of the job, because as people evolve, it's only other human beings who can sense that evolution and look for insight there. Um, and so, yeah, efficiency, sure, some parts of AI will help with that. Creativity, no, I don't think so.
I think generally creative work is divided into your master hero content work, and then there's your daily grind of creatives. And I think that's where there's a huge use case. There's a very clear use case I can see in front of me.
Yeah.
Um, we're at time now, so I'd love to ask you, generally as a parting thought, Jyoti, when you let's say look back on your career and you could probably advise a young marketer today who maybe wants to be a CMO one day, wants to be a head of marketing one day, like
Yeah.
what is it that it takes really to become a marketing leader, and what should their focus be in their earlier parts of their career?
I think in the early parts of career, two pieces of advice that I have. The first one I already covered, which is learn your craft really well. I think there is no shortcut to that, and working hard is the only way to do it. I think the other piece of advice I would say is look for look for champions in your career. And I don't mean that in the sense of look for champions, to just get ahead. But I think have people who have your interests at heart from a professional point of view, and they will really help push you to learn more, push you to deliver more, open up sort of opportunities for you that only they can at the seniority that they have. So I'd say look for those champions and work with people who can open those doors for you. And it's always helped me to have bosses who are like that.
Awesome. I think towards the end, what you mentioned is so underrated. People don't spend time in thinking who their colleagues will be, who their, leaders would be. So couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. This, marks the end of the conversation. I hope you had fun, Jyoti.
I did. Thanks so much, Kaman, for having me, and wishing you and Indiefolio all the very best. But thanks so much for the platform to share my thoughts.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor. And for everybody who's tuned in, thank you so much for staying till the end. If you'd like to hear another marketing leader, please subscribe to our channels. A new episode will come out very soon. Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.